morning and welcome to MAICC's Community Podcast Series. We're here to inform, inspire, and support. Thank you so much for waiting for us to get started. Sometimes there are some technical difficulties and we'll be a little late, but hopefully you are able to sit back and relax, have a little bit of coffee while you waited for us. Excuse me. I'm the host, Twana Anderson, the Community Engagement Director, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in. Here, we invite our partners to join us for a conversation about their organization's service to the community, challenges they're facing, and their future plans, all the while weaving principles throughout to help you have an impact on a child's mental health journey. We are streaming this episode live, but if it will be available anytime you feel like learning something about children's mental health and the community that serves them. If you enjoy this video, please help spread the word. This is actually our very first podcast series, the third one in this series, and we still may be a little bit nervous trying to get the kinks out, so please always will ask to be patient with us. Also, during this episode, we may make reference to books, articles, other information that will support the knowledge that you'll gain during our time together today. You'll find those links in the description along with contact information for our guests so you can stay connected. I want to encourage the audience to respectfully ask questions for our guests in the YouTube chat. We may have an opportunity at the end of today, our time together, to answer some questions. So if you have any, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them if we have the opportunity. The Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health has a mission to promote and pursue optimal mental health from infancy to young adulthood. Every topic of this podcast is approached with an open and critical mind, exploring opportunities to view circumstances through a different lens. Being in this space means that we advocate for all children to have equal access and opportunities to develop the skills to nourish their lives. We begin to help others remove their blinders while we're also being challenged to remove our own. We need to see other people. We need to see each other, appreciate their perspectives, and perhaps even learn from their journeys. Engaging with community is what I do here at MAICC, and this podcast is something new. We're doing this so that we can share our partners with you. Whether you are a parent, a caregiver, a relative, or a friend of a child or young person who may struggle with their emotional awareness, we hope that sharing our resources with you in this way will become a valuable tool for you. We are, historically, MAICC, we are a professional development organization. That's our jam. We provide excellent educational opportunities to providers and educators, offering continuing education online in our training series, or through one of our 2 annual leading children's mental health conferences. We also recognize the need to provide our resources in a different and unique way that reaches everyone. And I know you may have thought yourselves in that moment that a podcast is not very unique, and you are correct. But we're still bringing this to you in this format because our partners, the people that we work with every day, have unique ways that they present what they do, their services to the community, and we want to make sure that we share them. So again, this is the 3rd episode in this series. We will continue to center our conversations around infant and early childhood principles that are used by Minnesota's Montessori family, how they nurture and support children's mental health, as well as the staff serving their students and their distinctive connections to the community. So let's meet our guests. Now, Nora has already been with us. I'm going to not say as much about her, but we'll bring her on in a minute. But let's talk about Janice LaFloe, who is the founder of MAICC and the former primary guide in the Children's House. She is a member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa Tribe, Belcourt, North Dakota. Janice earned her bachelor's degree in political science at Macalester College in St. Paul. She then went on to earn her master's degree in public policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. Prior to her Montessori work, she served the American Indian community of St. Paul for over a decade through her work at the American Indian Family Center and at St. Paul's Indian Education Program. Janice completed her Montessori training at the Minnesota Montessori Training Center in St. Paul in 2013 as a Bush Foundation Leadership Fellow. Let's welcome Janice. Janice, hi.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to join you today.
I appreciate you being here. So now let me just set up my screen real quick so we can bring everyone in the correct order. Thank you, Janice. Let me take a moment to just introduce LaVon, who is the leading leadership director and has been with MAICC since its inception in 2014. LaVon is an enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota Nation. You are going to have to make sure that you correct my pronunciation on that, in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. She has a bachelor's in sociology from Macalester College and a master's of education from Penn State University. Prior to working at the American Indian Childcare Center, LaVon served as the executive director at the American Indian Family Center, a position she held for 10 years. She also worked as the co-director of Supporting Diversity in Schools, an initiative of the St. Paul Foundation. She worked as a program officer at the Grotto Foundation, overseeing the Native Language Revitalization Initiative and the American Indian Family Empowerment Program. While at Grotto, she founded the Tiwahe Foundation. Did I say that right, Janice? Tiwahe Foundation, and served as its administrator. So I'm going to bring in Nora because this has to be done in a certain order so that we're all sitting here in the same way. I didn't read Nora's bio, but we're going to ask her to tell her about herself. Hi, Nora. Thanks for being with us again.
Happy to be back.
And then here is the wonderful LaVon. Thank you for joining us, LaVon.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Okay, now we're all on the screen together. I really, again, appreciate you being here. And one of the things that I wanted to just talk about, because I really try to connect my story to what we're talking about here today. And so one of the things I was thinking about, you may not know this, but within many Black communities, many of us believe that we have, like, we're all Native. A little bit of us, we have it in our DNA. An old friend of mine from the fire department really embraced her Native heritage. And she had a lot of Polish in her, but she really embraced her Native heritage. She invited me to attend a powwow. And this was years ago. I was on the fire department so many years ago, retired from Minneapolis Fire Department, which is where I met Laura. And what an amazing experience I had. It made me feel even more connected. Our histories are intricately intertwined. And I'm so excited to talk more about how you serve your community. So, and again, this is my personal story, my personal opinion. I want to make sure that we take a moment to just say that we are not endorsing Montessori schools and their particular principles. We are simply sharing opinions and opportunities that exist throughout the Twin Cities. So now that all the housekeeping stuff, all the technical stuff is out of the way, let's dive right into it. LaVon, Janice, tell us a little bit about your career and your journey to the present. How did you get here? Let's start with you, LaVon, since you're first on my screen.
Well, early learning and child development was not a career goal. When I was in college, I majored in sociology and I hoped to teach. I went from there to working out foundations. I returned to the community in St. Paul and worked there for 10 years. And even though early childhood education was not a career goal of mine, I've always worked in the community in some capacity. And when you work in the community, in our kinship way, we're aunties, we're grandmas, we're uncles. We serve many different roles. So in that way, I've always connected with children. At the American Indian Family Center, we worked with a prenatal group, we worked with a mother's group, we worked with a doula program, we worked with children's groups, we worked with youth groups. I've always had a connection to the youth in our community and the children in our community. And they've always honored that opportunity to serve as a role model for our children, and as a role model, teaching those values that are important to me as a Lakota woman, and making sure that children learn those values as well. So I didn't plan to be at the Montessori American Indian Childcare Center. I served as an advisor to Janice since the inception, providing guidance, and agreed to work with her for a year. And it's almost 11 years later. I'm still here because of my love for children. And with the young children, they have such a pure spirit and they're so sacred. And it's hard to leave them. So that's one of the things that's kept me beyond the year. It's the children and knowing that we're having a great impact in their life and for their future.
I love that. You know, children. I as I got older, I realized that Dolly Parton actually wrote the song for Whitney Houston, The Greatest Love of All. And that is like, every time I think about the work that we do, that's all I think about. The children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. But we have, the first part is teach them well, right? And so understanding that they have amazing people like you, LaVon, who have that, the spirit of service to them is amazing. Janice, I know that it's been great having LaVon there by your side. So tell us a little bit about your journey here, you being the founder, and let us know how you got here.
In many ways, it was probably the long-term journey we all take in life that we never recognize where we end up until it appears on our path, right? I too didn't expect to be doing early learning ever. But that love of learning was one of those first jobs right out of college that sparked my interest and drove my motivation, is watching a child and having that light bulb go off, beaming with pride, fills your own heart all the way up. Right. And that work with children over the years has been a big part. Started out after graduation in the Indian Education Program, and then moved into the role at the American Indian Family Center working with LaVon, and having been there and a part growing all of those gaps and services that existed in the American Indian community. So that's really what brought me to the work of early learning. It was that last big gap that existed in culturally relevant, culturally grounded early childhood care and learning. 12 years ago, 15 years ago, didn't exist in our community. And so that's what drove my interest in applying for the Bush Foundation Fellowship, was launching, a Montessori American Indian Childcare Center. Montessori was another one of those life's journeys, and along my pathway was my youngest child, Dakota. And it was through him that I became introduced as a parent to how beautiful the Montessori approach is. And in that, learned more about how it really is living and practicing our own cultural values as a Native person every day with children. And so I'll end there because I'm assuming we have a few more interesting questions to share more.
Yes, just what your comment, your response to that question gave me so many more questions to ask you. But before we do that, let's go ahead and give Nora an opportunity to just introduce herself to the conversation. Nora, you've kind of been that thread that we've had throughout all of our conversations. So I thank you again for coming today. But give us a little bit about your background and how you ended up here. And then talk a little bit about pride that Janice just mentioned, about the pride that children have when they're in Montessori schools, if you would.
Yeah, I'm Nora. I'm Director of Outreach and Licensed Social Worker with Montessori Center in Minnesota. I've been here a little over 6 years. I took a meandering path to this position as well. And it's been truly an honor to walk alongside both Janice and LaVon in learning from their lifeways and what they do with children, and how both in my role as a social worker and then within the Montessori Center, how all the worlds just collide, and it's really exciting work to do. And like I've said on other podcasts, I have a Head Start background, and Janice and LaVon also have incorporated Head Start into their childcare center. And so I think it's a really unique model that's, I talked about last week with Deanna and how she's so creative in blending funding streams. And it's the same thing with Janice and LaVon too, in making sure that their education is, or that their childcare center is accessible to the community. So I think Janice and LaVon are true leaders in the Indigenous reclamation of early childhood education, and really pushing the boundaries on redefining what that looks like for American Indian children. And so it's been great to be alongside you all in this journey, and I'm happy to be here co-hosting the third episode. I'm really going to miss these episodes when we're done with it.
Listen, I've had such a wonderful experience getting to know each school individually, but also recognizing the comfort you must have had, Janice, in following the Montessori way when it came to establishing your school. So talk about how you approach the values and commitment to the community, because Montessori way means there is a connection to community. Right? It's also the principles are very specific and very powerful. So how did you find that your values and your traditions lined up with the Montessori way? And how did that encourage you to really really lean into that when it came to creating your school, Janice?
Very interesting question. I think one of those first recognitions about how our Indigenous cultural values and practices fit within Montessori was, like I said, it was my experience as a parent first, and observing the nurturing and the authentic love for my child in Cornerstone, right? Cornerstone opened 12 years ago, more than that actually. So my son was a toddler. It was that authentic way in which they treated children. And once I started training, I learned more and more about Dr. Montessori, and what really began to solidify that was the very fact that Dr. Montessori was an observer of children first. And observation is still the key to understanding early learning development. But more so, it was ways in which we learn as Native people. Long time ago, right? How were we kept? We were kept safe in things like a cradle board. And so the first things of observation was watching everything going on around us from the time we're born. So that very first development of senses was observation. Dr. Montessori learned and recognized that there was something unique happening within children during this period of time. And the only conclusion she could come to was that it had to be spiritual, that there had to be something spiritual within the child that gave them this unique capacity to absorb everything around them, right? Children have a unique capacity, and we now know it's about brain development, right? But it's more than brain development. And it's that love and that spirituality within children that was like, oh, okay. So it was lots of small steps along the way. And again, a learning journey with children, using our ways of learning traditionally that were reinforced in an approach and a method of education, the Montessori, method that we bring together. And it wasn't exactly easy or comfortable at first in those first few years, but it was that learning period with children that evolved and emerged how we began to organize how we were and how we are with children. So that's the refinement of learning as adults, right? Once you're a Montessori child, you develop a love of learning. And it wasn't just the Montessori approach that builds that love of learning. LaVon and I are wonderful examples of starting a Montessori childcare center. In our mid-career, later career lives, is that we both still encompass the concept of we still love to learn. And now we're learning with and from children, with and from families, about how we address some of the healing and creating opportunities to a healthier and acceptance of how learning can be different than what it has been in the last few generations for our community.
I love that answer, Janice. Again, I feel so connected just with that process, the way you're thinking about things, and the powerful phrase that you said there is Montessori gives you the love for learning. And I see that. Like, I don't know that I've shared with you before, but my son went to Montessori when we first moved here. That was his early childhood foundation as well. He didn't go to a daycare. He went to Montessori. And I didn't even think that I recognized the amazing foundation that he received there until later on in his life. Even now that we talk about it, when he thinks about, yeah, that gave me a great foundation. He's doing wonderful, wonderful things. And so I love that. And LaVon, as the leadership director there, what is your biggest challenge? Well, first of all, tell us what it means to be the leadership director there, and then just share with us kind of the challenges that you see that you're kind of faced with as in that role and for your school in general.
I think what I really value as a leadership director is that I have the opportunity to pass on values like Janice alluded to earlier, and to really ground our children in those values that are so important to us. Part of the work that we do in grounding our children and part of their development as upcoming leaders and compatible with Montessori methods and philosophy is to truly understand the kinship system that exists in our community, not only among people, but the kinship that we have with Inamaka, Mother Earth in the Lakota language, our relationship with the animate, the inanimate, our relationship with animals, but it's how we're all interconnected and that respect that we have as we're interconnected in our community. I'm looking at challenges in our community. I think that a challenge is, and we see this in our work, and Janice have seen this in our work over the years, the children and families. And we didn't understand what interhistorical trauma or intergenerational trauma meant. And I'm beginning to have a better understanding of that as I go back and reflect on my life and that of my family. And I think, and I really like to talk about this when I talk about early education, because we have a school that provides an environment that loves our children. And I always like to talk about the Carlisle Indian School that was created in 1876. It was one of the first boarding schools for American Indian children. Children were removed from their homes without the permission of their parents. They were placed in these boarding schools, and their culture and language was really eradicated during that time. They could not practice it. They could not speak their languages. And if they did, they were punished. So when you look at those old pictures, and I love looking at old pictures of American Indians, but when you look at American Indian children that went to these boarding schools, you see children that are in clothing that doesn't reflect who they are. You see children who had their hair cut that doesn't reflect who they are. None of them are smiling. And you see this profound sadness in their eyes. And then I reflect and I look at our school. And every morning our children come in bouncing, laughing with a sparkle in their eyes and ready to learn, that love of learning. And that's what we offer to our community. And at the Carlisle Indian School, the mantra there was kill the Indian, save the man. And that's what was happening to our children. So those challenges that stem from that time, we continue to see today. We see that intergenerational trauma that we haven't totally addressed yet, but we believe that we can improve the mental health of our children and our families by going back to our traditions and our values and our customs, because that is healing in that process, and it's really important. And that's what we do with the children and families at our school, is trying to reconnect them to their culture, to the ceremonies that heal them in the process.
I love that. I love that. Nora, you have a unique position within the Montessori world here in Minnesota, right? Where you have the opportunity to connect with all of your Montessori schools that embrace the Montessori principles, but tailor it to their community, to their culture. How did that program even come about? Before we move back into talking about MAICC specifically, how did you all, and I like to call you kind of the center of it all in Minnesota, how did that program come about? What are the needs that you saw that needed to be addressed? And then what were the steps, or what are the steps, just in case there's someone out here listening right now who may be interested in opening their own Montessori school?
Yeah, I think, so what you're referring to is MCM's initiative called Montessori Partners Serving All Children. And this was really an initiative driven by Molly O'Shaughnessy. We talked about it a little bit in the first episode of going back to the roots of Montessori, and that it's really for all children. And so how do we be in community in a different and more authentic way, and partner with people like Janice and LaVon and some of the other people that are on these podcast episodes, and really figure out how to increase that access to Montessori for children within the cultural values of the community that it matters to. And so that means being in true partnership with each other, and that we have things to offer and you all have incredible strengths and wisdom to offer us. So it's really that collaborative partnership together that makes the MIPSAC collaborative so strong and full of wisdom. And so like I talked about earlier, some of the biggest barriers are finding a facility, renovating or building, and finding capital funds to make it work. And Janice and LaVon can talk about their expansion plans and their journey with facilities. And then the second part is that's a big challenge in getting a school off and running is the training for the adults to get their Montessori diploma. And so those are the two big things if you're thinking about starting a school, facilities, and then getting the right training. And so you can always email me, nora@mtcm.org, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. And the collaborative has really been a grassroots kind of thing. And MAICC has been there from the very beginning of it all, even with Dakota being a child in Cornerstone from the very beginning. So both Janice and LaVon have been with us in this mission from the very start. And something that I wrote down in listening to both of you speak is just what does that look like in your environments and in your classrooms and in your programming, and how do you pair Montessori with your Indigenous philosophy?
Yes, please address that. Nora, you're an amazing co-host. Thank you very much. That was my next question, because the whole point of this podcast is to give information to parents, caregivers, aunties, uncles, grandparents who are out here who are a part of your community, but may not even know that you are there for them and the children in their lives. So go ahead, Janice, answer that wonderful question.
How do we embed language and culture? Well, first of all, it really is that I'm the first person children see. I'm outside of the home, right? The children's house is the transition to an elementary level setting, but to be reflected in who they are and to know that their first official teacher outside of the home is a Native person is one of the most important ways. Children see themselves reflected in who it is serving them, right? And then I'm going to give you a practical example, right? How do we embed language and culture? So we've developed a whole rotation, so to speak, of our cultural values, our language that we're working on in both Ojibwe and Dakota, grounded in what in Montessori is termed the nomenclature aspect, right? And life cycles. So in May each year now, we actually are gifted through another partnership, butterfly larvae that have recently hatched. And in the month of May, we talk about being compassionate and how to be kind and gentle. But we get to watch and admire and understand that caterpillar grow and grow and eat and eat and grow and grow and eat and eat. And there's so many wonderful caterpillar stories, right? But there's also caterpillar stories grounded in both of our cultural traditions about how Nana Bajou and why Nana Bajou created the butterfly for children. So we share that traditional story with them. We observe and learn about the life cycle of the butterfly, and we actually watch in our environment. We have, 20 to 30 little caterpillars who are growing and growing and eating. And what do they do next? Oh, they spin that cocoon. And then we're like admiring for another 7 to 8 days before they emerge as a butterfly. And butterfly, and when we're thinking about all of that, what we're doing and talking about is how to be kind and gentle, how to be compassionate, because butterflies are very fragile. And then ultimately, when they've gotten big enough and ready, we take them outside and we release them, right? How do we embed? We embed it in almost everything that we do in our everyday interactions and learnings through our traditional stories. And then, of course, Memengwa and Kamimina are those terms for butterfly in Ojibwe and Lakota. And it's learning the stories and how to care for each other. And then we talk about who eats butterflies? What do butterflies eat? The life cycle. LaVon talked about how we're all related in that kinship term and practice. What we do every day is as highlight an opportunity in which we get to practice all of our cultural self, right? And that love and respect for everything around us about how we are interconnected and that we are all related.
That's one of the aspects of Montessori way that I really love and appreciate, the connection to self, family, community, because I really think that's how we progress, right? We become who we are, really settled in the person that we are in our own being, that affects our families, that affects our neighborhoods, and then really has an impact on our communities. But it really just starts with us and at home. So I love that Montessori and specifically you all there at MAICC, and how you weave that into the care that you give for your children. The other thing that I appreciate, LaVon, is the principles of infant and early childhood mental health that you all incorporate into your teaching and your learning, and the care that you give to your children who come to your school and to your teachers. So speak a little bit about that, if you could, LaVon, how the principles of mental development in our children affects how you teach and lead your children and families, for that matter.
And I think in a lot of our work, we rely on what we call the medicine wheel concept. And that model nurtures intellectual development, emotional development, physical development, and spiritual development. And all those things are important to the development of the children in our community from infancy through teenage years and actually through adulthood. So it's a key component of our work. I wanted to share, as Janice was talking about values, and this is related to your question, is teaching that spiritual essence that exists in our community and with our children. So as we're teaching children values to be compassionate, to be kind, to be generous, to be humble, to show humility, we also teach them how to take those values and put them into practice. You can't just talk about them. You have to show in actions how you treat people. And when we eat lunch, children say a prayer. A child is selected that has demonstrated really good leadership during the morning work cycle. And they're selected to do that prayer, to lead a prayer in either Dakota or Ojibwe. And when they're holding that spirit dish and they're leading the thank you song, you see the pride and confidence on their faces. So while we don't talk about a mental health program, everything we do is related to mental health because it's strengthening the spirit of our children. It's building their confidence. It's providing them with information and opportunities about ceremonies, about the storytelling that Janice is sharing. So everything is related to mental health. We don't call it mental health, but it's related. We also recognize that often the children and the adults in our community, they carry the hurt and the trauma from their ancestors. And it's important to recognize that and that we provide those opportunities to connect families and children to their culture and to those ceremonies because that's healing. And that helps with those mental health issues sometimes that we have. If you know traditionally how we took care of each other, how we prayed together, how we attended our ceremonies together, because that's healing and it's part of our mental health and really going back to that and practicing that in our organizations, not only with the parents, but with staff and with the children.
How do you bring parents into that process? Because it's a little, one of the things about infant and early childhood is through that particular field, you have the opportunity to bring the parents along. Parents who may have never thought about their own personal mental development or the way that they react to challenges that come throughout their lives. How do you bring parents into that, Janice, in a really safe way that helps them understand that even though you're approaching that topic with their children, with that in mind as the foundation and the backbone, how do you bring parents along in a comfortable way so that even they get a chance to understand what that historical trauma means to them?
Thanks for asking that. We actually have a wraparound approach called Family Nest, right? And that is our purposefully designed program to support parents in their parenting development, their parenting knowledge, their parenting skills, to help specifically do that. But it really starts through day-to-day interactions grounded in what we're doing and having short conversations about the children. What does it mean to have freedom of movement throughout the day? And what does it mean at home to have that freedom of movement? And of course, freedom of movement still have the need for the adult to set those parameters and those boundaries. But that is what we're talking about. It's the day-to-day short, brief conversations about the development of freedom of choice. And what does that mean? And how to support a child's independence. Often it's you give them a little time to practice that skill. right? It's just reframing and developing a routine and habits that support children in really those three big important aspects of development. In relationship, it's through conversation, and in programming, we also have family luncheons, and it's Halloween, it's Valentine's, it's winter solstice, it's going out to Dodge Nature Center in the spring when it's time to tap the maple trees and understand how we once collect maple sap and turn it into maple sugar and maple candy. Those cultural experiences are also a part of what we do. We grow a garden every year, so children know parents are a part of helping us put those seeds in the ground, literally and figuratively, planting seeds together to harvest by the fall and coming in and helping us weed. We actually also organize two curriculums that we utilize, and Terry Strom is our parent and early learning coordinator, who is trained in the circle of security. And so circle of security is grounded in developing healthy attachments with children. So when we recognized and understood that there was a little bit of this struggle, because for a couple of generations, we've been, affected by how do we develop an attached relationship and recognize. We've been implementing Circle of Security for a few years now with our families as an opportunity to walk through that curriculum, which is an amazing curriculum. And the other curriculum that we implement is called the Minnesota Native American Parent Training Curriculum, which is actually grounded in positive Indian parenting, which is also a very old curriculum that's also grounded in traditional parenting and parenting practices and finding strength in your cultural ways as a parent. So we really invest and use those words about we invest together. We're in this journey together for this few years that we're together. And the last aspect of that would be that we are a multi-age environment. So 3 to 6 years old, all in one space. So we, over the years, have had siblings, of course. And our longest relationship we're still on, which is 6 years now? Because there's, continuing siblings to come in with us. So we form these longer relationships that allow us to have short, small conversations that continue to share and exchange and build and learn together.
That's amazing. So one of the things I want to share with the audience is that every school that we've brought on here, I've personally gone and visited with you all in your place, in your space, and learned, about the environment and so many wonderful things. And I got a chance to sit in with your children, which I feel like was not anything that's anyone is able to do when they come to visit you. And one of the great things that I noticed is that they're so welcoming to me. Like they came up to me, "What's your name?" "My name is," and I feel like they wanted to include me in everything that they were doing. And so I felt a little weird being there because I didn't want to take up their space. But I found that all of your children were so kind and accepting of me, this perfect stranger that just walked into their space. And LaVon, how does the way that you teach, the way that you approach learning, really bring that out of children? Because that's not, to me, not anything that most children are just doing on their own.
I think it goes back to the compatibility between Montessori values and philosophy and American Indian worldview and values. They are so compatible, and it's values-based. I think the first thing that we do with our children is to teach them those values. They saw you as a relative, as part of our kinship system. And in the Lakota language, we have a word that says "mitaku yeo yasin." We are all related, whether we're humans, whether we're animals, whether they're rocks. We're all related. There's this kinship system. They saw you as a relative, and they welcomed you into our classroom because you're a family member. And I think that's one of the values that we teach our children, that we are related and they are welcoming and they love to visit and they love to have conversations with people. Our children are so amazing. You can have a conversation with a 3-year-old. And I always like to tell stories about children to show the impact of the work that we're doing. But when a child comes in and I can say, what are you going to do today? And they say, I'm going to learn about the continents today. How many 3-year-olds can tell you that? Or how many 4-year-olds can tell you that water is sacred because they have that cultural knowledge of the culture and can say Mani is sacred, Mani is sacred. And Mani is a Dakota word for sacred. But to say water is sacred, and they know. And they make that connection because of the work that we do with our children. But it's all values-based, Tawana, and I think it's those values that are reflected in our culture and in Montessori methods that will prepare our children to be great leaders in our community. In Lakota culture, a great leader is defined by the compassion that they show to others. And that's one of the greatest characteristics in Lakota culture of a leader, is that first and foremost, you're compassionate. And our children are so compassionate. And again, I'll share a quick story and then let you get on with your questions. But several years ago, I think Miss Janice was gone, but we found a little frog, baby frog, and it was dead. But the children wanted to put it in water because they thought the water would revive it. So we did that, but it just continued to turn real gray. So finally said, we think that maybe, I think the frog is dead, and they wanted to bury it, and we buried it, and we said a little prayer. But to have that kind of compassion for things in our environment. We never kill anything in the building. Somebody's always chasing centipedes or spiders or whatever. But our children know that we do not kill them because these creatures have families too, right? But it's building that compassion in our children through Montessori values and Indigenous values.
I love it. And just hearing that values are brought into the learning process is so foreign to what our mainstream educational system is here. And whether we realize it or not, it does start in preschool, in those moments and opportunities in daycare. And so I want to just turn to you real quick, Nora, because I want you to kind of explain, if you could, why Montessori way does not include ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, red, yellow, orange. Like, it does include those things, but that's not the focus of the way that you teach through Montessori schools. Can you just tell us a little bit of how that bridge was built when it comes to educating our young children?
Yeah, I mean, Janice can probably do a lot better because she's the trained Montessorian in this room. But Montessori values of, freedom of movement, freedom to repeat. What's the other freedom that I'm missing? Freedom of choice, the biggest choice. Really allows for children to be in charge of their own learning. And we know through those freedoms that children are able to master skills and they are able to choose for themselves, which really increases their independence. And so they feel empowered to be citizens in their classrooms and to be citizens of their homes and to really have that autonomy, but in respect of each other and for the community that they are part of. And so maybe Janice, you can expand on that since you are the one who's gone through the whole diploma course.
Certainly, Nora. I think that what I truly, appreciate about the Montessori approach is one, it is multi-age learning. Children learn best by watching each other And when you have a multi-age environment, they're inspired by the older children. The older children become the helpers, right? And help the younger children. Similar to how we once worked as family and in community, we get to revive that aspect of being good leaders and being good helpers. But Montessori, what it really focuses on is it understands that children and child development are drawn to beautiful things. There's a whole sense of organization and logic that is beginning to develop. And so we guide that in ways that help them flourish and foster. Everything in a children's house is beautiful and it's inviting, and you want to go and touch it, and you want to, absolutely, let me show you how. And so it's that curiosity that drives that motivation, that drives that engagement, and it's engagement with the materials that helps a child learn how to develop focus and concentration. So the greatest skill set, and I don't even want to call it a skill set, but it is when a child is fully absorbed in their work, and then they finish that activity, and then they're processing all of that experience. Not all children have been given that opportunity to be fulfilled and satisfied in their development of concentration. So children truly begin to know that there are beautiful things that are inviting, and it meets and it helps motivate them, that drives their own self-development of focus and concentration, right? And fulfillment of that sense of again, that sense of pride and accomplishment when they've done a good work, right?
I love that. I love that. And let me just add to that too, as you are cultivating the spirit of focus, as they are doing whatever task they choose to do because it's their choice. I also think that it's important that you also teach them the aspect of cleaning up when they're done, if I can put it in a simple way. So even once they're done exploring and choosing what they want to do, no matter how many times they want to repeat it, that repetition, they also have built within them to take care of those things, to put them away in a way that's so caring and thoughtful, so that the next child who wants to use it finds it in the same place that they found it in.
Well, and you know, math and literacy is a very important part of the Montessori environment as well. You know, like the 4 areas are practical life, so learning to take care of yourselves and others, and then sensory, mathematics, and literacy. And so, and it just looks different because we know that children learn through hands-on ways. So the literacy is all about feeling the letters before you begin to write them, and mathematics is all like very tactile in order to like not have it be so abstract for their concrete minds of what they need. And that we, within the Montessori environments that I've really grown to love, is not only do we respect the child, but we trust the child. We have real plates, real glasses. We have, you know, fragile items, so children learn to respect the materials within the classroom too. And so I just wanted to also clarify, like the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s and the math is all embedded into the environment in a very, very intentional way.
Thank you for giving us that point of clarification, Nora, because it is important for parents and caregivers to know that the foundation that Montessori schools are giving their children sets them up for success wherever they go next, right? The skills, the compassion, the values, all those things that are taught through Montessori just sets them up for success in the next level. And a lot of it has to do with the people who are there to teach them, to guide them. LaVon, I know that through Nora, there are opportunities for reflective consultation or supervision for your staff. Can you talk just a little bit about that relationship that you have with Nora and how those opportunities help your staff to really become better in the work that they're doing for your students?
I'll just jump in here and say MAICC is one of the few early childhood centers that has their own social worker. So they all have it in-house.
Okay.
I'm just here to be their cheerleader.
Okay.
So maybe LaVon, you want to clarify what that looks like?
We do. We have an in-house social worker, and actually she worked with Nora at the Montessori Center of Minnesota several years ago, and she's now working with us and has worked with us now for about 5 years with her work at MCM. And she's very grounded in American Indian culture and values and accessible to staff. She's also the person that provides the circle of security training that Janice alluded to earlier. And she's a great role model. I mean, staff highly respect her and look to her for her guidance in a number of things. Janice, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but Terry's been a great addition to our staff.
Absolutely.
And available to them.
I think one of the aspects that you were initially maybe getting at was the mentoring and this professional development support available through the Montessori. It is a mentoring opportunity for up to 3 years as you're a new guide to be partnered with an experienced Montessori guide to provide that mentoring in your learning as a primary guide in the environment with children. So mentoring is important. We also have it on site through Terry because she's such a great mentor for all of our staff to access. And so mentoring is an important aspect of what the training center is also able to provide. They've done like connections like this, workshops for all of the Montessori partners serving all children. And one of the other aspects is a mutually agreed upon evaluation process and model. We know that I've got parent testimony for 10 years, but when it does come to what funders often ask, and how can you show us? So that's a big part of our work and how Montessori does make a difference. I love to share that in learning, it is it's not uncommon, and it's probably more common for children by the time they leave us to be well grounded and ready for elementary, because some of them leave us reading at amazing levels, doing all the 4 operations of math already. So it is amazing where you can take a child through when that curiosity is sparked. Not every child comes in with a love of letters or sounds, but when they do, that's what they're curious about every day. And so every day we're working on sounds and associating to the symbols of the letters. And pretty soon we're writing with the movable alphabet, which emerges into reading and then reading. So there's a whole 3 years worth and then some of opportunity that develops not just their cognitive skills, but as LaVon was talking about, those social and physical aspects of development that happens between 3 and 6 years old as well.
I think, Tawana, one of the things we haven't really mentioned is that Montessori is an educational model that's over 100 years old.
Yeah.
That we wish that we had known about many, many years ago to close that educational gap for American Indian children by starting with early learning. And public education has failed our children. And here's a model that we didn't know about that works, that's compatible with an Indigenous worldview. And we didn't know about it. And it's a great opportunity. And I think Janice and I have talked about, how do we take this model and how do we grow it in other Indigenous communities? Because it's a model that works. And I think that our children will leave us well prepared for elementary school, well prepared for their life. They have the practical life skills that we talk about. They're grounded intellectually, They're grounded in their culture. They're grounded spiritually. They have everything they need to succeed. And it's because of the compatibility between Montessori philosophy and Indigenous values and worldview. And I think everybody should know that.
And thank you so much for making it a point to share that as well, because the purpose of this podcast is to share our partners with the community, a community that may not know anything about Montessori, a community that may not know anything that the Montessori American Indian Childcare Center is even available for their children. And so being here in this space, I'm grateful that we're able to talk more in depth about what it is that you do and how you serve not just children, but your community as well. So thank you for adding that. And so as we are getting ready to wrap this conversation up, and let me just stop and say again, you're listening to a Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health podcast. We're leading with knowledge, compassion, and support. Please take a moment to follow our channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you know when we're coming live again. Let's talk just a little bit now that we've really explained how you are connected to community, let's talk about barriers that parents might face to be able to send their children to your campus.
Tuition.
Tuition is the barrier.
It's a challenge, and it's been a challenge since we opened 10 years ago. We work with families that do not have access and financial means often for their children to attend a quality early learning program. And while many of our children over the years have been eligible for early learning scholarships or CCAP funding through Ramsey County, there's a long waiting list. And that has been a challenge for us. And we were created to serve children in our community. We never turn a child away because they didn't receive an early learning scholarship or they didn't receive funding from the county. And we absorb those costs. So, and we understand that we're not generating funding for general operations to support some of those needs, but we also understand that the children are a priority in our community. And if we want to make a difference in their educational path, we have to honor the child and provide the support that we need to provide to them and their families so that they can attend our school financially.
Janice, what kind of funding support do you have? And then what is still needed? Like, traditionally nonprofits, we do a lot of grants, right? We're sitting around writing grant after grant after grant after grant that really comes with a lot of strings, and you have to do a lot of dancing and hoop jumping. And so tell us what the funding sources that you currently have as well as you can tell us. And then what would alleviate, what kind of funding sources would alleviate some of the issues that a lack of families being able to send their children because of tuition may place upon you?
I would like to share that we are always grateful and appreciative of those foundations who do give and invest. We've had support for a majority of our time from the Better Way Foundation, who is made a commitment to American Indian early learning for a number of years, and that's where they give. We have also received, as LaVon said, those general operation grants are the ones we prefer because they come with the least amount of strings. But one of the other significant opportunities was the Community Solutions Initiative. A couple 4 years ago now, that launched right before the pandemic, and it was a state grant that has allowed us to pilot our prenatal to 3 and our expansion of services. And so that pilot is now being, sustained, and we are now in the second round of those Community Solution Initiative grants through the state, and are grateful because now what we knew was that we always have a parent who's expecting. And how are we preparing and supporting that parent in their birth outcome and in those early learning years before they come to us at 3 years old? We now have a prenatal to 3 program that offers weekly playgroup, a lending library, monthly workshops, and one-on-one visits. And so we braid and weave. Good thing, right? A lot of different sources, but we really appreciate, I'll be honest, those general operation grants from foundations that fit what we need. And I say that specifically because we don't necessarily go after everything and anything. It is important that it's compatible to where we're at in exercising our own, what I call educational sovereignty, right? We are the educational sovereignty model because we make choices about how it is we serve our children and our families. A big thing happening in our world right now is our expansion and our location to a new center, right? We are now in the midst of renovations, right? The walls are going to start coming down, then a demolition, installation of some other things, and we'll be looking to move in August and reopen in a new location after Labor Day. And so we are forever grateful for those funders that are helping fund that, and always appreciative of donations towards that. I'll just share that as well. And so it's complicated, but you have 2 highly educated American Indian professionals who know how to navigate that world to ensure that our focus can be on a high quality early learning, experiential based, child-centered healing experience at the foundational level.
Your energy just is so explosive. Like, I'm smiling just listening to both of you talk about what I want to just refer to as the love of your lives. Like, I feel like this is your child that you're developing, your school, not just the children within your school, but how your school is growing. And that was my next question. I feel like you all have just been a step ahead of me the whole time, because I want to know what lies ahead for MAICC, and then maybe you can share your top 3 priorities that you have over the next 18 months. And again, because we're sharing you with our community, we want to make sure that we leave them with some tangible things that they can do to help support what y'all are building there, right? And so what are your next 3 priorities over the next 18 months that, as a listener, as a parent, as someone who may be connected to a funding source, like what would we be supporting you in doing over the next 18 months?
I will comment on one of the priorities that we're looking at, and Janice alluded to our move in the fall.
Yes.
We're moving into a building in partnership with 2 other organizations, the American Indian Family Center, Interfaith Action, and its Department of Indian Work program. We're going to co-locate in the building that we're moving into first, so that we can offer integrated services to our community. And so somebody may drop their child off at our child care center. They may access the food shelf. They may access a therapist. They may access the youth program. They may visit with some elders, so that we have everything co-located in one building. It's called the Oyate Ota Center, which means the people's place in the Dakota language. So that's a big piece of the work that we're doing now, and will probably continue to do for the next year or 2, as we raise funds to support the actual purchase of the space that these 3 organizations are moving into. So that's one priority, raising funds to support our new space.
Awesome. Janice?
In our specific expansion as a childcare center, we will be expanding to being able to provide 2 children's houses and the toddler environment, right? So we're going to almost, triple in the size of what we can provide to families. We know the list and wait list is there. We know they need that early learning and they need the care, right? And so the expansion of that, which also means we actually are looking for candidates to go through training to allow us to expand our staffing. So we have been recently awarded a dual training grant so that we can help support and offset the costs of going through Montessori training. The Montessori Training Center will be our training partner. And we're working really hard right now to ensure that training is paid training for those people, because we'll actually need 3 more staff in a new children's house and at least 2 more staff for a toddler environment. So we're looking and hoping to train, 4 to 6 new staff members to join our work. And so when you're asking and sharing, share, because that's what we're looking to do over really in the next 12 months.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us, because, I'm one of those people who believe that it's not necessary to go and reinvent a wheel that's already rolling very well. But how do we support, even if, it's too late to jump on the bandwagon, like the wagon is long gone? How do we continue to lay what I call pipeline into communities, into services, into organizations that are doing great work? And so being able to lay that pipeline for y'all here is really important for me. So thank you again for being here. I've enjoyed this conversation. We are well over our hour, but I still wanted to give you both an opportunity to just give the audience a parting thought. If you could just wrap up anything that you'd want to say to a parent or a caregiver, to someone who knows a child that can really benefit from coming to your school, what would you say? Let's start with you, LaVon, and then we'll end with Janice.
I think the first word that comes to mind when we look at children as being the center of the work that we do, that they're Wakanjia, that means the sacred child in the Dakota language. So we honor the sacredness of that child when they come into our preschool, and we respect them when they come into our preschool, and we value those children as our children in our community.
I would further add that we all play a role in the lives of the children in which we're directly involved in and maybe indirectly involved in, because we just see them out and about in community. Remember that they are our future, and the more we enrich and enhance and nurture and support healthy development, the better off all of our communities are. And that's what we are ultimately, striving to do, is to create and heal and support that next 7 generations, right, to thrive again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nora, I want to give you an opportunity to, for parting words as well. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what both Janice and LaVon said in making sure that we center our work with children. To do that, we need a really healthy workforce, and we need to invest in our workforce to be able to recruit to the field, to have healthy adults in the classroom who are able to show up every day and to serve the children. And so I would just put a plug in for joining the early childhood field and consider Montessori.
Yes. Well, again, thank you for taking the time out today. Hopefully, I'm giving you a little bit more time back in your day, ladies. But I appreciate you being here, speaking from the heart, sharing the love and passion that you have for the work that you do. I'm sure that people who watch this are feeling that through the camera because you are just, so amazing and purposeful in your passion. And that's what I really appreciate that you all are bringing to the early childhood space. So thank you again. Thank you again for joining us.
And Tawana, I want to say thank you. It's not often that we have a voice at the table to be able to tell our story. So thank you so much for having us.
You're so very welcome. You're going to make me cry. Thank you very much. So I'm going to relieve you all from your post right now. Please feel free to stick around. And then after I sign off, we can have a little conversation off camera as well. So thank you again, you all.
Thank you.
All right, so now here it is, just me again. Let's get this off of here as well. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And I hope that you are able to take something away. Because I really appreciate that they carved out this time, very busy schedule that I know that they have. And I want you to learn more. I want you to want to learn more about the opportunities that Montessori has for you, whether you are, a student in school who is interested in teaching or becoming an early childhood educator. Think of Montessori. Whether you're a parent who's out there looking for a place for your child that gives you more than what daycare centers maybe provide. I want to challenge you to look more into the Montessori schools. And then if you are a parent or a caregiver or a student, make sure you go to their website so you can learn more about them and the ways that you can contribute. The things that I feel that are important to point out is that with Montessori, your child is in charge of their own learning. Like if nothing else you get from this, that your child is in charge of their own learning. And here at MAICC, it's very specific and cultural in the ways of the American Indian population here in Minnesota. And so please take a moment, learn more. That's why we're here, for you to listen. It's not a very unique way, a podcast to provide information, but hopefully we're giving you some information that will inspire you to learn more and encourage you to support in any way, whether it's reaching out to your network and saying, hey, this wonderful school is here, right here in the Twin Cities, and they could use your support. Or if your child, because I have children who are old enough to be teachers, hey, if you are thinking about a different way to be a teacher, a different way to serve children in our community, then Montessori is a way that you can do that. So hopefully we've just inspired you to learn more and to do something to support, because that's really what it's all about. So again, thank you. Please make sure if you've enjoyed this podcast, like, subscribe, make sure that you're sharing with what we're doing. We really appreciate your support here as well. We're on all of the social media, ways that you can follow us, MACMA or MACMA.org, you can find us. And then Montessori, if you just Google Montessori in Minnesota, you'll come up with all of these amazing partners. So again, thank you. We'll be back here next Wednesday with our last episode in this series with Morning Glory Montessori, who their specific focus is on young Black boys. And I can't wait to have this conversation with them as well, because I know that they're doing some really great things in the community. And I want to make sure that we share what they're doing as well. So again, thank you. We will see you next Wednesday. So have an amazing day.